The village elders gathered in hushed circles, their eyes darting nervously to the edge of town where a wild-eyed stranger had appeared. His clothes were in tatters, his hair matted with leaves and twigs. He muttered incomprehensibly, eyes unfocused and darting about as if seeing things invisible to others. The villagers whispered among themselves, wondering what dark forces had driven this man to such a state. Little did they know, this seemingly broken soul would become the catalyst for change that would transform their community forever. My name is Beo, and I'm here to share the extraordinary tale of my friend Akin. Our story begins far from this remote village, in the bustling heart of Lagos, where Akin and I were pursuing our engineering degrees at the university. We were an unlikely pair. I was the serious student, always with my nose in a book, while Akin was the life of every party, charm personified. Akin came from a devout Christian family, the kind that never missed a Sunday service and said grace before every meal. But Akin himself, he was what you might call a holiday Christian. He'd show up to church on Christmas and Easter, more to please his parents than out of any real conviction. Prayer was a foreign concept to him, unless you counted the desperate pleas he'd make before exams he hadn't studied for. One sweltering afternoon in our second year, Akin burst into our dorm room, his eyes shining with an excitement I'd never seen before. He was practically bouncing off the walls as he exclaimed, "Beo, my brother, I've seen an angel walking on our campus." I couldn't help but chuckle at his dramatics. An angel in Lagos. I think the heat's getting to you, my friend. But Akin was undeterred. He described the girl he'd seen outside the literature department, hair like spun gold in the sunlight, eyes that sparkled like stars, and a smile that could melt the coldest heart. "I'm telling you, Beo, she's the one. I'm in love." I shook my head, amused by his sudden poetic turn. "Well, don't just stand there waxing lyrical. Go talk to her." For the next few weeks, Akin was a man possessed. He'd stake out the literature department, trying to accidentally bump into this mystery girl. He'd practice what he'd say in front of our mirror, much to my amusement and the annoyance of our other roommates. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of pining and planning, Akin gathered the courage to approach her. He returned to our room that evening, a strange mix of elation and dejection on his face. "Her name is Amina," he said, flopping onto his bed. "And she turned me down flat." I tried to console him, but Akin was already formulating his next plan of attack. "She just doesn't know me yet," he said, a determined glint in his eye. "I'll win her over, you'll see." And so began Akin's great courtship campaign. He'd leave little notes of poetry on her desk before class. Once, he even convinced the campus radio station to play her favorite song with a dedication. Each time, Amina would shake her head, a mix of amusement and exasperation on her face, and walk away. This went on for months. Most guys would have given up, moved on to easier conquests. But not Akin. With each rejection, he only grew more determined. It was like watching a moth repeatedly flying into a flame, fascinating and painful at the same time. Then came the day that changed everything. Lagos was in the grip of an unusually fierce rainy season. The skies had opened up, turning the campus into a series of muddy rivers. Akin spotted Amina outside the library, struggling with a heavy load of books, trying to shield them from the downpour. Without a second thought, Akin rushed to her aid. He shrugged off his jacket, holding it over her head as he took some of the books from her arms. For a moment, they stood there in the rain, eyes locked. And then, like the sun breaking through storm clouds, Amina smiled. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the patter of rain. Perhaps we could have that coffee now." From that day forward, Akin and Amina were inseparable. Where once Akin had been the life of every party, now he only had eyes for Amina. They'd spend hours in the campus cafe, heads bent close together, lost in conversation. On weekends, they'd explore the hidden corners of Lagos, discovering hole-in-the-wall restaurants and quaint bookshops. 3 years passed in what seemed like the blink of an eye. Before we knew it, we were donning our graduation gowns, ready to step into the real world. As we celebrated our newfound freedom, Akin pulled me aside, his face serious. "Beo, I'm going to ask Amina to marry me," he said, his voice filled with nervous excitement. "I want to meet her family, do things properly." I clapped him on the back, genuinely happy for my friend. But as I congratulated him, I couldn't help but notice a flicker of something in Amina's eyes when Akin mentioned meeting her family. It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual warm smile, but it left me with an uneasy feeling. As Akin prepared for his journey to Amina's village, I realized how little we actually knew about her background. In all the time they'd been together, Amina had shared very few details about her family or where she came from. All we knew was that her parents lived in a remote village, somewhere in the heart of the country. Eager to make a good impression, Akin went all out. He bought new clothes, carefully selected gifts for her parents, and even practiced his greeting in the local dialect. The night before he left, we all gathered to wish him luck. As I hugged him goodbye, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. "Be careful," I found myself saying, though I wasn't sure why. "And call me when you get there, okay?" Akin laughed off my concern. "Relax, Beo. I'm just meeting my future in-laws, not heading into battle. I'll be back before you know it, engaged and ready to start our new life together." With a final wave, Akin climbed into the taxi that would take him to the bus station. As I watched the car disappear into the Lagos traffic, I silently prayed for my friend's safe return. A week passed with no word from Akin. Then too, I tried calling his phone, but it always went straight to voicemail. Amina was nowhere to be found on campus. As the days ticked by, my worry grew into full-blown panic. Just when I was about to report Akin missing, he returned. But the man who walked into our apartment was not the same one who had left. Gone was the confident, cheerful Akin I knew. In his place was a nervous wreck, jumping at small noises, his eyes constantly darting around as if expecting danger from every corner. "Akin," I exclaimed, relief and concern warring within me. "What happened? Where have you been?" He mumbled something about strange customs and family obligations, but when I pressed for details, he quickly changed the subject. It was clear he didn't want to talk about his trip, and I didn't want to push him. I hoped that with time, he'd open up and share what had clearly been a traumatic experience. But as the weeks passed, Akin's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He stopped going to his new job at the engineering firm. He'd spend hours pacing in his room, muttering to himself in a language I didn't recognize. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night to find him sitting in the dark, staring blankly at the wall. I tried everything I could think of to help him. I urged him to see a doctor, a therapist, even suggested we visit his parents' church. But Akin refused all offers of help, insisting he was fine even as he visibly unraveled before my eyes. Then, one morning, Akin was gone. His bed hadn't been slept in, his phone left behind on the nightstand. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The next few months were a blur of police reports, searches, and sleepless nights. Akin's parents were frantic, convinced their son had been the victim of foul play. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened in Amina's village was at the root of Akin's disappearance, but with Amina herself nowhere to be found, we had no leads to follow. As the weeks turned into months, hope began to fade. The police suggested we accept that Akin might never be found. His parents held a memorial service, more to give themselves closure than out of any real belief that their son was gone. I attended, my heart heavy with guilt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have done more, should have seen the signs of Akin's distress sooner. Life, as it tends to do, went on. I threw myself into my work, trying to fill the void left by my friend's absence. But I never stopped looking, never stopped hoping for some news of Akin. Then, nearly a year after Akin's disappearance, I received a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end belonged to a man who introduced himself as Pastor Emmanuel from a small village in the eastern part of the country. "I believe I have found your friend," the pastor said, his voice calm and reassuring. "A young man wandered into our village some months ago, in a state of great distress. He couldn't tell us his name or where he came from, but recently he's begun to recover. He speaks of a friend named Beo in Lagos." My heart raced as I listened to the pastor's words. Could it really be Akin? After all this time? Is he okay? I managed to ask, my voice thick with emotion. "He is much improved," Pastor Emmanuel replied. "My daughter, Suwa, and I have been caring for him. He is no longer the wild, frightened creature who first came to us. But he still has a long way to go. I think seeing a familiar face might help his recovery. Can you come?" Without hesitation, I agreed. Within days, I had taken leave from work and was on a bus heading to the remote village where my long-lost friend had somehow found refuge. The journey was long and arduous. As we left the main roads behind, the bus bumped along dirt tracks, winding through dense forests and across wide rivers. With each passing mile, I felt like I was traveling back in time, leaving the modern world behind. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we arrived at a small clearing in the forest. A cluster of mud brick houses with thatched roofs surrounded a central square. Children played in the dust, their laughter a stark contrast to the somber reason for my visit. As I stepped off the bus, a tall man in simple clothing approached me, a warm smile on his face. "You must be Beo," he said, extending his hand. "I am Pastor Emmanuel. Welcome to our village." I shook his hand, grateful for the friendly welcome but anxious to see Akin. "Thank you for contacting me," I said. "How is he? Can I see him?" The pastor's smile faltered slightly. "Akin has made great progress," he said carefully, "but you must prepare yourself. He is not the same man you knew in Lagos." With a mixture of anticipation and dread, I followed Pastor Emmanuel to a small hut on the outskirts of the village. As we approached, the door opened, and a figure stepped out into the sunlight. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. Gone was the fashionable, outgoing young man I had known in university. In his place stood a gaunt figure dressed in a simple white garment. His hair had grown long, and a scraggly beard covered his once smooth chin. But when he turned and his eyes met mine, I knew. It was Akin. "Beo," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is it really you?" I rushed forward, enveloping my friend in a tight embrace. "Akin. Oh, thank God you're alive." As I held him, I could feel how thin he had become, his body frail beneath the loose garment. When I pulled back to look at him, I saw that his eyes, once so full of mischief and life, now held a haunted look. "Come," Pastor Emmanuel said gently, "let's go inside where we can talk comfortably." The interior of the hut was sparse but clean. We sat on simple wooden chairs while the pastor's daughter, Suwa, brought us cups of fragrant herbal tea. As we sipped the soothing brew, Akin began to speak. "Beo, my friend," he said, his voice stronger now, "I have quite a story to tell you." Over the next few hours, Akin recounted his harrowing experience. He described his arrival in Amina's village, a place that seemed frozen in time. The moment he stepped off the bus, he felt a change in the air, as if he had crossed some invisible boundary into another world. The whole village was decorated with red and black cloth, Akin said, a shudder passing through him at the memory. There were strange symbols carved into the doorways of every house, and the air was thick with the smell of burning herbs. Amina's family had welcomed him warmly, but Akin couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He described how he was served traditional food and drink in calabashes, each meal accompanied by muttered incantations he couldn't understand. When I finally met Amina's father, Akin continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. He wore a red robe covered in charms and amulets. His eyes. Beo, his eyes were not human. Amina's father had congratulated Akin on winning his daughter's heart, but there was a cruel twist to his smile as he spoke. He told Akin that to marry Amina, he would have to join their family business. It wasn't until later that Akin understood the true nature of what he was being asked to do. They wanted me to join their cult, Akin said, his hands shaking as he gripped his cup of tea. They practiced dark magic, Beo. Real, terrifying magic. They told me I would have to participate in rituals to prove my devotion to their gods. Akin had tried to refuse, to explain that he came from a Christian family, conveniently forgetting his own lack of faith. But Amina's father had merely laughed. He told me I had no choice, Akin said, tears forming in his eyes. He said that by being intimate with Amina, I had already bound myself to their gods. That if I refused, they would curse me, drive me mad. Horrified and angry, Akin had confronted Amina. Why didn't you tell me? He had demanded. Why did you let me come here? Amina's response chilled him to the bone. Because I love you, she had said, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I want us to be together for eternity. In that moment, Akin realized that the Amina he thought he knew had never really existed. She had been a lure, a beautiful trap to bring him into their dark world. Akin had fled, running from the village with nothing but the clothes on his back. He managed to catch a bus heading back towards Lagos, but as the miles passed, he felt a darkness growing in his mind. It was like a fog descending, Akin explained, his brow furrowed as he struggled to recall the details. I could feel myself slipping away, losing control of my thoughts. By the time the bus reached the next town, I was no longer myself. The next few months were a blur of fragmented memories. Akin recalled flashes of running through forests, sleeping in ditches, eating whatever he could scavenge. He was driven by a primal fear, always feeling as if something dark and terrible was pursuing him. I don't know how long I wandered, Akin said, or how I ended up here. The first clear memory I have is waking up in this village, with Pastor Emmanuel praying over me. Pastor Emmanuel picked up the story from there. He explained how he had found Akin unconscious at the edge of the village, half dead from hunger and exposure. When I first saw him, I knew he was in the grip of powerful dark forces, the pastor said. But I also saw a spark of light within him, fighting to survive. The pastor and his daughter had taken Akin in, nursing him back to health. They prayed over him daily, using what Pastor Emmanuel called blessed water to slowly cleanse Akin of the darkness that had taken hold of him. It was a long and difficult process, Pastor Emmanuel said, placing a comforting hand on Akin's shoulder. There were times when we feared we would lose him. But Akin's spirit is strong. He fought his way back to us. As Akin regained his strength, he began to help around the village. At first, it was simple tasks, fetching water, helping in the communal garden. But as his mind cleared, he found himself drawn to the pastor's work. I had never been religious, Akin admitted, a hint of his old smile appearing. But after what I'd been through, I was hungry for something positive, something that could drive out the darkness I'd experienced. Under Pastor Emmanuel's guidance, Akin began to study the Bible, not as a set of rules to be followed, but as a source of wisdom and comfort. He joined the pastor in his daily prayers and started to assist with the small services held in the village. It was like I was seeing the world through new eyes, Akin said. I began to understand what my parents had tried to teach me all those years. Faith isn't just about rituals or saying the right words. It's about finding light in the darkness, about choosing love over fear. As I listened to Akin's story, I was struck by the transformation in my friend. The carefree, sometimes reckless young man I had known had been replaced by someone more thoughtful, more grounded. There was a peace in his eyes that I had never seen before. Akin has become a valuable member of our community, Pastor Emmanuel said proudly. His experiences, though painful, have given him a unique ability to connect with those who are suffering. Suwa, who had been quietly listening to our conversation, spoke up. Akin has a gift, she said softly. He can reach people in a way my father and I cannot. They sense that he truly understands their pain. I spent several days in the village, watching as Akin went about his new life. I saw him consoling a young mother whose child was ill, his gentle words bringing comfort where medicine could not. I watched him mediate a dispute between neighbors, finding a solution that left both parties satisfied. But most importantly, I saw the joy that this work brought him. The Akin I had known in Lagos had always been searching for something, the next party, the next thrill. This Akin seemed to have found what he was looking for all along. As my visit drew to a close, Akin and I took a walk to a nearby stream. As we sat on the bank, listening to the soothing sound of running water, Akin turned to me with a serious expression. "Beo," he said, "I need to go back." For a moment, I thought he meant Lagos, and my heart leapt at the idea of my friend returning to his old life. But then I realized what he truly meant. "You want to go back to Amina's village?" I asked, unable to keep the shock from my voice. "Akin, after everything that happened there." He held up a hand to stop me. "I know it sounds crazy," he said. "But I can't move forward until I face my past. And I think I might be able to help others who are trapped in that darkness." I wanted to argue, to tell him it was too dangerous. But looking into my friend's eyes, I saw a determination I had never seen before. This wasn't the reckless bravado of our university days. This was something deeper, more purposeful. "I'll go with you," I found myself saying. "You shouldn't face this alone." Akin smiled, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, my friend. But this is something I need to do on my own. I'm not the same man who ran away in fear. I'm stronger now, and I have faith to guide me." We spent the next few days preparing for Akin's journey. Pastor Emmanuel provided guidance and prayer, while Suwa prepared herbal remedies that she claimed would offer protection against dark forces. I couldn't quite bring myself to believe in such things, but after all that had happened, I wasn't about to dismiss them either. The morning of Akin's departure arrived all too soon. As we stood at the edge of the village, I found myself fighting back tears. Part of me still wanted to stop him, to protect him from whatever dangers lay ahead. But I knew this was something he needed to do. "Be careful," I said, echoing my words from that day in Lagos that now seemed a lifetime ago. "And please, keep in touch this time." Akin laughed, a sound that warmed my heart with its familiarity. "I promise," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "Pray for me, Beo. I have a feeling I'm going to need it." With a final wave, Akin set off down the dusty road. I watched until he disappeared around a bend, then turned back to the village with a heavy heart. All I could do now was wait and hope. Days turned into weeks with no word from Akin. Just as I was beginning to fear the worst, a message arrived. It wasn't from Akin, but from a number I didn't recognize. The message was brief: "Come quickly. Your friend needs you." Without hesitation, I packed a bag and set out for Amina's village. The journey was tense, my mind racing with all the terrible possibilities of what I might find. When I finally arrived, I was shocked by what I saw. The village was normal. There were no ominous decorations, no strange symbols carved into doorways. Children played in the streets, and people greeted me with curious but friendly smiles. It was nothing like the place of darkness Akin had described. I was led to a small house on the outskirts of the village. Inside, I found Akin lying on a bed, pale and weak, but very much alive. Beside him sat Amina, her face etched with concern as she dabbed his forehead with a cool cloth. "Beo," Akin said weakly, a smile spreading across his face. "I'm glad you came. There's so much to tell you." Over the next few hours, Akin and Amina filled me in on what had transpired. Akin had indeed returned to confront the darkness that had nearly destroyed him. But what he found was a village in the midst of its own transformation. After Akin's disappearance, Amina had been consumed with guilt. She had confronted her father about the harm their practices were causing, not just to outsiders like Akin, but to their own community. Her words had sparked a change that had been brewing for years. Many in the village, especially the younger generation, had grown weary of the old ways. They wanted to connect with the wider world, to build a future that wasn't shackled to dark practices. Amina's father, seeing the tide turning against him, had fled the village, taking his most devoted followers with him. In the months that followed, the village had undergone a remarkable transformation. Under Amina's leadership, they had reached out to neighboring communities, building bridges that had been burned by years of fear and suspicion. When Akin arrived, instead of finding a bastion of darkness, he discovered a community hungry for change. He spent weeks sharing his story, offering words of encouragement, and helping to heal old wounds. His own experiences of redemption and transformation resonated deeply with many in the village. But the work had taken its toll. Akin had pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion, his body weakened by the strain of confronting old traumas and channeling so much emotional energy. He collapsed during a meeting with the village elders, Amina explained, her eyes filled with worry. "We've been caring for him, but he needed you here. He needed his friend." As Akin regained his strength over the next few days, I watched in amazement as he and Amina navigated their complex history. There was no denying the deep connection between them, but it was different now, tempered by experience, rooted in mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. When Akin was well enough to travel, we returned to Pastor Emmanuel's village. The reunion was joyous, with the entire community coming out to welcome Akin back. As we celebrated that evening, I noticed the way Suwa looked at Akin, a mixture of admiration and something deeper shining in her eyes. In the weeks that followed, Akin threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. He traveled to other villages, sharing his story and helping communities heal from the scars left by superstition and fear. Sometimes I accompanied him on these trips, watching with pride as my friend touched lives and brought hope to places that had known only darkness. Amina returned to Lagos, determined to use her education to help bridge the gap between urban and rural communities. She and Akin remained friends, their shared experience creating a bond that transcended their past romantic entanglement. As for Akin and Suwa, their relationship blossomed slowly, built on a foundation of shared faith and mutual respect. It was a far cry from the whirlwind romance Akin had experienced with Amina, but in many ways, it was deeper and more lasting. A year after Akin's return from Amina's village, I stood beside him as his best man as he and Suwa exchanged vows. The ceremony, held in the heart of the village that had become Akin's second home, was a joyous celebration of love, redemption, and new beginnings. As I watched my friend begin this new chapter of his life, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought us to this point. Akin's story, from carefree student to a man driven to the brink of madness, and finally to a beacon of hope for others, was a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. It taught me that even in our darkest moments, there is always hope for redemption. It showed me the power of true friendship, of faith, and of facing our fears head-on. But most of all, it reminded me that it's never too late to change our path, to find purpose and meaning in life. As the sun set on the village, casting a warm glow over the celebrating crowd, I raised a toast to Akin and Suwa. To new beginnings, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And to the light that shines brightest in the darkest of places. Akin met my eyes, his face radiant with joy and peace. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, my friend had finally found his way home. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and comment, click on the link below.